The Viking Age was a tumultuous period when raiders and pirates from Scandinavia changed the very face of Europe. For England, the apex of that era was the Great Heathen Army's invasion. A large number of warriors attacked, and unlike in prior decades, they were not there to loot and pillage, but to conquer and settle. Norse and Anglo-Saxon ways of life differed greatly. The warfare, politics and diplomacy of the occupied areas, known as the Danelaw, are well known and popular topics. However, the daily life of the people there is a neglected topic which we will cover in this video. Shout out to Magellan TV for sponsoring this video. If you haven't heard yet, Magellan TV is an awesome new type of documentary streaming service run by filmmakers that has over 3,000 documentaries worth watching. Magellan TV has the richest and most varied history content available anywhere. Ancient, modern, current, early modern, war, biography, and even non-historical genres like science and crime are historical in nature. One of their documentaries, Vikings, Merchants and Explorers, was crucial in the preparation of this video, and it describes how the Norse revolutionized exploration and trading in the Middle Ages. We're also big fans of Sigurd Bjornsson Viking Exile, which tells the story of the Viking warriors. You can watch both documentary series anytime, anywhere, on your television, laptop or mobile device, and it's compatible with most devices. The best part is Magellan TV is offering a 1-month free membership trial to our viewers. If you haven't signed up to Magellan yet, support our channel and do that at try.magellantv.com/kingsandgenerals. You will get a free 1-month membership trial. Thanks to Magellan for supporting our channel. Most often, the Vikings are typed as seafaring marauders who looted Christian settlements and recorded their barbaric adventures in epic poetry. But this picture, inspired by the hostile pens of the English and Irish clergy, is far from complete. The Norse were a civilized people who flourished on land as well as sea, and the vast majority of them were simple farmers, fishermen, and traders. Scandinavia was a very inhospitable place, with short warm periods each year and a small amount of arable land. It was also undergoing a population boom by the middle of the 9th century, putting additional strain on the people living there. That being the case, the Great Heathen Army's invasion of England proved to be a much-needed opportunity for many families to find new land. The Danelaw was a world of violence and gold, swords and slaves. But it is important that we don't confuse myths with reality during the period. Though very different from our own, there was a much more ordinary, mundane side to life. People made things and traded them, tended crops and livestock, cooked, looked after their homes, drank, gambled, and went to the market. The streets of Viking York or Dublin would have been lined with beggars, thieves, and prostitutes, yet alive with the sounds of children playing, artisans working, and merchants selling their wares. The functional unit of these communities was the family, and the Norse took great pride in their clans, especially the ancestors, as they knew of their forebears' lives and deeds through many generations. The family formed a tight-knit group. Members stood by each other through any difficulties, and an insult to one was an insult to all, just as well as dishonor incurred by one brought dishonor to the entire family. Yet at the same time, family authority did not bury independence and initiative, as sons were allowed to follow their own path of life, be it at home or away as warriors and traders. Women enjoyed significant rights as well, both legally and in practice. They could own and manage properties, had authority in household matters, and very often ran things while their husbands were away. For the Norse, marriage was a sophisticated matter. It was not only the marriage between a man and a woman, but also a joining of two families in an alliance. The marriage was typically organized by the heads of each household, yet both the bride and the groom had the right to refuse. Wives would also keep their own patronymic instead of taking their husbands'. Not only that, but in case of dispute between the husband and someone in the wife's side of the family, the wife was allowed to take the side of her relative. The legal matters behind a marriage were also quite complex. the two sides had to exchange a dowry and a bride price, and the bride would also receive a gift from the groom on their wedding night. Due to their complexity, the exchange of property and promises would take place before the actual religious ceremony. The wedding ceremony itself would be traditionally held on Fridays, as it was the day of Frigg, the goddess of love, marriage and childbirth. During the wedding, an animal would be sacrificed, and the priest conducting the wedding would smear their own forehead with the blood and then sprinkle the married couple with it. Divorce was also common, and there was no stigma towards either party if it happened. After a woman from a Norse household gave birth, the newborn would be presented to the father, who would name the child, or if the child was sick, deformed, or born to a slave, have it left in the wild to die. A classical education did not exist for them. Instead, children would work hard from an early age and learn to farm, craft, and fight. Hard work was highly respected, and the child most likely to be ostracized or ridiculed would be the one that worked the least. A child would become an adult at the age of 12. Most children stayed at home for several more years after that. However, it was not uncommon for boys of that age to be sent on Viking expeditions or to live and work with a foster family. Inheritance was also a complex matter in the Danelaw. The oldest, or sometimes favourite son, would inherit all of the family properties. However, he was obligated to pay his brothers for their share of the inheritance. As stated before, each family member had the right to pursue their own goals, and younger brothers would often use their inheritance to build or buy their own house, whether in a town or on a farm. Younger brothers also frequently bought longboats with their inheritance to use for trading or raiding. Friendship was also quite important in Norse society, as people who were very close but not related could establish a blood pact known as a foster brotherhood. As Viking society was not as clearly stratified as in the rest of medieval Europe, blood bonds could even be formed between chieftains and their slaves. This goes to show how social mobility functioned in Norse communities, as people did not become slaves through birth or divine right, but through sheer bad luck. Masters would often grant them freedom and even land, property, or the right to marry into the family. Another aspect of society which was lost after the fall of Rome and that the Vikings reinvigorated was hygiene. The Norse bathed at least once a week and changed clothes regularly. They also took great care of their long hair, so it is no surprise that one of the common objects in Viking excavation sites is the simple comb. Most Norse households also contained a bath, similar to the modern Finnish sauna, something unheard of in the rest of Europe at the time. One Anglo-Saxon chronicler, John of Wallingford, wrote that the Danes made themselves too acceptable to English women by their elegant manners and their care of their person. They combed their hair daily and took a bath every Saturday, and even changed their clothes frequently, and improved the beauty of their bodies with many such trifles, by which means they undermined the chastity of wives. The famous Arab traveller Ibn Fadlan even noted in his travels, "Every day they must wash their faces and heads. Every morning a girl servant brings a great basin of water. She offers this to her master, and he washes his hands and face and his hair. He washes it and combs it out with a comb in the water." Accordingly, it was also considered very offensive to make somebody dirty or their clothes dirty. As Scandinavia was a region where fertile soil was rare and low temperatures made crop failures regular, the Norse lived in rural areas more infrequently than people from the rest of the continent. Many of them relied on craftsmanship and trade, so the settlers in the Danelaw brought those habits with them. As those occupations were less profitable in rural areas, the Vikings founded various cities throughout Europe to be able to survive. Prior to the arrival of the Norse, England had only 5 settlements which could be considered cities. However, only a few decades afterwards, the number of cities would increase significantly. In developed cities, such as York or Norwich, the Vikings had a crucial impact on urbanization. The cities grew significantly, and even 2-story buildings began appearing. Many Anglo-Saxons would migrate to those cities in the following decades as well, as the large number of Norse manufacturers and traders provided a chance to earn and learn new skills. As big an impact as the masterful Viking shipbuilding techniques had on warfare, it is safe to say that it had an even more significant influence on trade. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, trade outside of the Mediterranean ground down to almost a complete halt. The Norse, who were renowned travelers, sailed to lands as far as the Mediterranean, the Levant, and by sailing through the grand rivers of Eastern Europe and the Caspian Sea, they managed to set up trade missions even as far as Persia, Mesopotamia, and Volga Bulgaria. York and Norwich may be good examples for Viking trade cities. However, the one that grew to be one of the most important trading centres was Dublin. It prospered from the trade goods imported from England, Scandinavia, and further lands. However, what made it extremely rich was the slave trade. Viking raids into Ireland brought back many enslaved into Dublin, and from there they were sold even as far as Khazaria and Kufa in Iraq. Some of the most sought-after products in the Danelaw were walrus hides and tusks. The hides provided for excellent ship ropes, while the tusks were made into crucifixes, caskets, or sword grips. Other important resources which were needed in England were timber, iron, and meat. The Viking raiders and warrior bands may have frequently preyed upon the Anglo-Saxon commoners in the areas of the Danelaw. However, the relationship between the new Scandinavian settlers and the locals was cordial. Initially, there was a certain degree of enmity between the two populations, especially in places with a large Anglo-Saxon population. As time passed, though, relations became much warmer, as both communities found ways of benefiting from one another. The rise of trade and cities, for example, meant that the Anglo-Saxon commoner would be able to sell his product for much better prices and would not have to travel dangerous distances to do so. Intermarrying also became increasingly common throughout the years, something which was a catalyst for the conversion of the local Norse population to Christianity. All this would not have been possible, however, had the Old English and Old Norse languages not been similar to the point where neither translators nor bilingualism were needed. The Norse language had a crucial impact on the English language, as modern English grammar is almost identical to the grammar of the Scandinavian languages. Although it's true that the majority of the Scandinavian settlers converted to Christianity, that did not happen immediately. Before their conversion, the Scandinavians believed in the Germanic gods, such as Odin, Thor, Freya, and many others. The difference between Christianity and Germanic paganism was not just in the gods themselves, but in the way that they were perceived, how devotion was shown, and the extent to which they affected the daily lives of the people. For the Anglo-Saxon Christians, God was an omnipotent and omniscient being who was an integral part of their lives. They feared God, wanted to appease him, and behaved within the norms which were considered properly Christian. Meanwhile, the Norse saw their gods as beings which did not require devotion, adoration, or even approval. For the Norse, their gods would still exist even if the people would not, and they did not have to like them. They merely had to deal with them and stay out of their way. Norse temples were quite rare compared to churches, especially in the Danelaw. Instead, religion was a personal matter for each person and each family. Religious leaders existed in Scandinavia, however it is unclear whether any of them were present in the Danelaw too. It is far more likely that local chieftains took the role of religious leaders when it was necessary. On a daily basis, each person would choose if and how they would present their belief. Some would wear necklaces with various religious symbols, others would wear the famous arm and neck rings, and craftsmen would dedicate their works to a god. For important holidays and rituals, the Viking community itself would be the most important actor in the ceremonies. The most important of the Norse holidays was Yule, the celebration of midwinter and the Norse New Year. It marked the point when the sun would be at its lowest and its subsequent rebirth. The first day of Yule was considered the day when the god Yngvi Freyr would bring love and light back into the world. The wild hunt is also considered to start during Yule, a period of increased supernatural activity when Odin, riding his 8-legged horse Sleipnir, would roam the world together with the dead. One Yule tradition was that children would leave sugar and hay in their breeches for Sleipnir, and in exchange, Odin would leave them gifts. This is probably the origin of the Christmas stocking tradition, and it may also be one of the origin stories for Santa Claus. The midsummer holiday marked the height of the sun's power, and it was during this time that most foreign trade and raiding were conducted. The Winter Nights Festival marked the beginning of winter. Trade, travel and war would often cease during this period, and hunting and feasting would take their place. The Charming of the Plough festival marked the beginning of spring, and the return to normal yearly activities. One integral part of each holiday, festival and celebration was the blot, the sacrifice. Although humans were sometimes sacrificed during this time, it happened far less than is widely believed. The usual sacrifices would involve cattle and crops. Although most of the Norse were gradually assimilated by the local Anglo-Saxon population, or violently exterminated during the 11th century during the Harrying of the North and the St. Brice's Day massacre, the Danelaw's impact on society cannot be overlooked. Whether it is simple words and names, or even customs, ideas and social norms, they left their mark. We will talk more about the Norse in our future videos, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.